Here's my script. Could you read it?
Okay, yeah, and move that
Let's
script over
edit
here.
this part
Yeah.
out, okay? Going 10-1.
Rain dance, Sundance, Con.
Let's do this.
You guys ready?
Quiet Thank you
on
so
set.
much for this award. Ready and action. Welcome back to Mel Moment Mondays. I'm your host, Mel, and today I'm joined by a very talented screenwriter and producer, Diana Romero. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is super exciting.
Yeah.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, oh my gosh. So tell me, how did you get into the world of filmmaking yourself?
Whew, okay, well, how long do we have? Do we have like 5 hours or maybe like a lifetime? Because it
No,
feels
it's
like
a
it was a
loaded
lifetime
question.
ago. So way back when, I'm going to try just edit out any dates or any years that I might say out there because we don't want to age me. But no, many, many, many years ago when I was going to school, when I went to college, I was always like I loved film and TV, but never thought that that's just not a job that people talk about having. So it was never, a consideration. And I grew up in Seattle and I came to LA for college. And in college, I pursued a degree in social work. And so, but towards the end of my 4 years in college, I remember a friend and I saw an ad looking for extras. And so we're like, hey, that'd be kind of fun to do and maybe make some extra money. So I started doing some extra work. And at that moment, I was like, oh, I'm going to be an actress. That's what I want to do. I love acting. And so I graduated from college, went back to school for a little bit to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, which I don't remember all the way, but I think I might have gotten kicked out of it for being late all the time. Something like that weird thing happened. But so then I was working as a social worker and I was working in an agency called Covenant House in LA, which works with young adults, runaways in Hollywood. We worked with the trans community. We worked with the sex workers on Sunset and Santa Monica Boulevard. And so we would work at night and just did a lot of work that now I look back and I'm like, wow, I did that. Like we would go into SWATs to buildings where kids were living and, where we would be looking for missing kids and helping the police or helping the parents find them. And as I was doing that and doing social work, I kind of went, and at the same time I was working, I was going to work. My work was from like 2 to 10 p.m. So in the mornings I was going to a production company doing an internship, which just happened to be a production company that was doing shorts for Showtime at the time. And what they would do is they would select a very well-known actor who wanted to direct a short. And so they would select, all these very well-known actors would submit. And the year before I was an intern, they had actually won an Academy Award for one of the actresses who, I'm trying to remember her name, but this was so many years ago, you guys, Christine Lottie. Her name was Christine Lottie, and she was in a show. She was a very popular actress at the time. So she directed a short, which went on to win an Academy Award. So the year I came to them, they were, just off that Academy Award and getting seen. And it turned out it was Christian Slater who was going to be directing. And I was in love with Christian Slater. I mean, I still kind of am. But I loved him. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to like meet Christian Slater. And I remember being at the reception desk and they were like, he's going to be coming in for a meeting, with producers. And he walks up to the desk and he's like, hi, I'm Christian Slater. And I'm sitting there going, I know who you are. And it's like, anyway, so he directed the short and that was my first time on set. And I was thrown into this, like, be a second AD. I had never, like, the only times I'd been on set was as an extra. So you're just sitting there watching all day long, which was fascinating. So they're like, you're going to be a second AD. And so we need you to be at base camp. We're going to, start at 5 a.m., whatever it was, and be at base camp and just guide the talent to the shuttle that will take them to set. And there was an actress whose name I won't name because I don't want to cause any issues, but she was so mean. She was a very well recognized actress, but she was so mean. And she arrives at base camp. And so, of course, I have to go greet her and I'm wearing my headset and everything. And I don't know what I'm doing. And she's like, she's screaming, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. They made me drive here all by myself on my own, yelling and screaming. And I'm like, I don't, all I know is to get you to the shuttle and they'll take you to the set, right? Anyway, lucky me, I got stuck with like basically wrangling her all day long for the rest of the day. I had to go to the trailer, make sure she was on set, blah, blah, blah. It was horrible. But Christian was awesome. And at the end, he gave me a hug and he said, thank you. And I was like, I'm sold. This is what I want to do. So I kept acting, but at the same time, back in the day, Hollywood was really awful for actors, especially actors of color. And as a Latina back then, I grew up in a very white world. My parents immigrated to this country, and I was born in Kansas, which is very white world, and then moved to Washington State, where the diversity lacked. But regardless of all of that, the roles that were there for Latinas were either you looked very East LA and you were very like, gangster type, or you were a maid. And I was in my 20s. I didn't fit either role. And there really wasn't much, and people were really nasty. It's changed a lot, but at the time, people were really nasty. So I left and I went back home and I started acting and theater. Ended up moving to Chicago where I saw a flyer for Columbia College, film and TV production. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to go behind the camera. And I loved social work. I was still doing social work my 9 to 5, but I knew that it wasn't I knew I wanted to tell their stories, all the stories that I was encountering. I knew that being a social worker, I would just see the older social workers and they just looked so tired and so drawn out. And so I was like, no, I want to tell their stories. I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to go behind the camera. So I went back so I had a BA in social work. I went back to get my second BA in film production. And so I went to Columbia College for 2 years and got my second BA in film production. And then I'd always wanted to come back to LA. So a friend of mine had applied to AFI, which is the American Film Institute. And I remember sitting there going, oh my God, I'm so jealous. I wish I could do that. That would be so amazing. That would get me back to LA. And I was like, wait, why don't I just do it? I can. And so I did. I applied and I got in. So I came, that was in 2005. So I'll age myself that way because, it leads to other stuff we're going to talk about. But so I went for producing and I graduated with a degree, with an MFA in producing. And when we graduated, so that's what got me in. That's what got me into the whole thing, was just the process of saying, I want to tell their stories and I wanted to write them. But then again, I also went into the world of I always wanted to do TV too, but my track just took me into film and I continued going to film and producing. And I can tell you more about that. But so that's what got me in. And then, several years later, I decided that I was going to focus on writing, which is what I'm doing now.
Yeah, what was that turning point for you where you went from kind of what you were doing into strictly just screenwriting?
Yeah, so I always wanted to write. And actually, while I was at AFI, was very discipline specific. So I applied for producing and got accepted as for the producing discipline. And so because they're discipline specific, if you were there for producing, that's all you were going to do. If you were there for directing, that's all you did. In undergrad, you took on the role of many different crew positions and you would, work in other people's, which we all worked and helped each other out as well. But if it was your project, that's what you were doing. So I focused on producing, the classes were all based on legal stuff and just what producers do, scheduling and budgeting, a lot of line producing, running sets, being the one that had to be like the watchdog on everything. So, but I wanted to also write, and they had the screenwriting discipline. But because I was a producer, technically I was only supposed to follow that path. So they were teaching, there was going to be one semester was going to be a quarter, whatever we were on, was going to be a television writing, screenwriting class, which was, they were going to be, the end result would be oh my God, I'm not even thinking straight, a spec script of an episode of an existing show. So I went to the school and I said, I would love to take this class. And they're like, well, discipline, blah, blah, blah. And so I kind of, appealed it. And they finally said, if the instructor and the students are okay with it, then we'll allow it. And you can do the work, but you're not going to be graded on it or anything like that. That was fine. So, and funny enough, now they're letting students audit classes, which is so awesome. But so I sat with the screenwriters and I took the and I wrote an episode of Grey's Anatomy. Grey's Anatomy was my favorite show at the time. So I wrote a spec episode of that. But the cool thing was the teacher was Dorothy Fontana, and she used to write as DC Fontana because back in her day, female screenwriters were non-existent. Nobody looked at female screenwriters, and she was one of the first. I think she might have been, I should look this up. She might have been the first female writer on Star Trek. And so, in science fiction, female writers in science fiction also was even more non-existent. So it was really cool to learn under her. And I believe I read somewhere that she created one of the worlds in Star Trek. And she passed away recently, but she had turned on to be a mentor of mine, and helped me out after I had graduated. So that class just opened my eyes into I really want to write. Anyway, I went on, I continued to produce, but at AFI, the one thing for our thesis films to graduate is that that was the only time that everybody in our class could submit a script. And then for our thesis films, and then the school would greenlight. If there were 26 directors, they would greenlight 26 projects. So I wrote a script that was greenlit by the school. So it was my first time writing and producing my own show and working with a director. And we wrote it, and despite there were, and we can talk about that later too, usual, like what happens on set and the relationship between a producer and a director. But with that said, we made the movie and it went on to win a ton of awards and it played all over the world. And it was asked, we had the FBI come to us and ask us if they could use it as an educational video. It never happened, but that was still pretty cool. They asked for that.
And what's the name of the film that you made?
It's called Niña Quebrada, which is Spanish for broken girl, and it delves into sex trafficking. And it started out with I first started writing because I wanted to write about my experiences working with sex workers, or the street workers in Hollywood. And as I was researching and writing and everything, I started reading about sex trafficking in the United States. And I was like, what? That happens here? Like, I had no idea. No clue at all. And it turns out that the US is one of the largest countries in the world that where human trafficking and sex trafficking are a problem, as we have seen in the news lately, more and more. Yeah. Anyway, so I started writing about that because I was like, oh my God, I didn't know about this. So I wrote that, and that was my first inspiration. And because it did so well, and because it won so many awards, and because of what I went through trying to get it made, was my first push into, okay, I can write something good. And then I just kind of struggled back and forth through different jobs. When we graduated, it was the writer's strike of 2007, which stopped production everywhere, which is really funny because now I start a new career and then we have another writer's strike last year, right? I'm like the strike whisperer or something. I don't know. So it was, and so I did a lot of other jobs, which we can talk about. And then in 2018, I have MS. And I had already been diagnosed with MS way before, but it started becoming symptomatic, like physically affecting me around 2010 or so. And in 2018, my mobility had gotten so bad, I ended up having to start using a wheelchair if I wanted any kind of life. So it was in 2018 when I said, you know what? That's it. I'm focusing only on screenwriting, away with producing, away with any other part of the industry. And I want to write for television. And so so in 2018 was where my focus, I went from producing to and just writing.
That's so interesting. It's really always interesting to hear about how people got to where they are now, or like where they had been. It's just it's such an industry where it's so unique to every single person that there really isn't one good way of explaining how someone should get somewhere, because it's like your own personal journey,
Yeah. Absolutely. I had a producing the head of the producing department at AFI told me once he was the producer of Back to the Future, and he's a producer in other movies that I can't think of right now, but Back to the Future was one of his claim to fame projects. And he said to me that Orson Welles told him that to be a producer, to be a filmmaker in LA is just like It's just like living in LA, any route will take you to LAX. And so he likened that to producing. Any route you take will get you to being where you want to be, or, and might switch to something else along the way. But yeah, there is no one way.
Yeah.
Not at all.
So what type of stuff do you write? Is there a specific genre? How much does it differ between like your personal, your personal screenwriting stuff, versus like the more corporately led screenwriting work that you've done, like Good Trouble, Mission Impossible, Rugrats, kind of that type of stuff. How does that differ?
So, uh, it I had said my first venture into television was doing the AFI, the spec script for and there's a difference when we say in television we say spec script versus in film. In film, a spec script is an original script that's never been done before. In TV, a spec script is an episode of an already existing show, which is it used to be a big practice to do, especially for all the screenwriting fellowships, was that you would submit an episode of an existing show, but they're starting to do away with that. So I don't think any of the writing programs now are asking for spec scripts. But anyway, so that's the difference. And there's so many different things credit wise, like in television and film are completely different. Everything, it's a whole different career anyway. So that was my first, was an episode of Grey's Anatomy. And then I wrote a spec script at the time for a fellowship about Law and Order. It was the Law and Order SVU. And I loved cop shows. I grew up watching cop shows, procedurals, everything. And love them, love them, love them. And I was like, I want to write. That's what I want to write. I want to write procedurals, detective, cop type procedurals. So I wrote in my movie Niña Quebrada, Broken Girl. It's about a woman who gets sold into a sex trafficking ring. And in the end, I don't want to give away the end, but basically she survives. Um, and um, and so what happened? So then I wrote a spec script, um, what happened to her 20 years later, because people would always ask me that. They're like, we just want to know what happens, what happens after the movie ends. And so I wrote a script based on where she is 20 years later. And 20 years later, she has now become a human trafficking detective for the LAPD. So that pilot script is based on her, now being in investigating sex trafficking and human trafficking cases, because I want to bring light to that. Because to this day, that movie premiered in 2008. So we're how many years later, and still, people. We just saw what happened with whatever P Diddy, Sean Combs, or whatever we want to call him, and we saw what happened with Jeffrey Epstein, and we've seen all these human trafficking cases, and yet it's still not a discourse. It's still not something we're talking about. So that's what I wrote. That was my in 2018 and 2019. Is that what, so you were asking me, like, so that's what I write. So I've written two pilots that are detective procedurals. In my first, in the one that's based on my short, the chief is a wheelchair user. So I use my experiences as a wheelchair user for that character. And in my second pilot, and that's based on I love true crime. I'm an ID channel addict. And so that's based on true crime, and it's a detective who's a wheelchair user. And we never see those roles for wheelchair users. But then I was always like, I'm not going to write about my experiences. I'm not going to write about being Latina, because for being Latina, everybody wants, like, it's always the same Hollywood trope. It's always the same stereotype, which I know nothing about. I'm like the least stereotypical, Latina person you meet, maybe. But so I've always refused that. And then I finally just wrote last year, and I'm still working on it, a script based on my life. And it's three timelines. It's when I was a kid trying to fit in. It was when I was, being a social worker, starting out in social work, and those stories that I've always wanted to tell. And then as an older adult using a wheelchair. So that's my newest thing. So basically crime and mystery thrillers, procedurals. And then also this will be more like a This Is Us. So more family drama.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like it's so important to like add your little bit of flavor into the work that you do, even if you don't feel like, as you were saying, oh, it's all kind of the same Hollywood flair if I write about my experience being Latina. But at the same time, I feel like it is important, even because you can just change something really little, and then
Mhm.
that leads to other things being changed and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I never knew people are like, find your voice, find your voice. Blah, blah, blah. We want to see your voice. And I was like, what is a voice? Like, I don't get it. I did not understand what this voice was. And it wasn't until I started writing my characters and throwing in like what you're saying that I started going, oh, I get what my voice is. I know what that means. And it's true. Like I'll remember little conversations that my family had, like, and my sister when we were kids, and I'll throw those in, right? And I'll tell you about the process that I learned doing writing. I learned after being in a writer's room and that's what I did for this pilot. The family
Yeah.
drama right now is I followed the process of what we do in writers' rooms, and that made it so much easier. And it made it, but definitely you're telling your own stories. You're throwing in your little experiences and little things, and comments or dialogue or personalities. All my characters are their personalities are based on people I know. And then my other little thing that I do is all my good characters are named after people I like, and all my bad characters are named after people that have done me wrong all my life. So that's my way of my retribution. And that's how I'm going to get back at you for being a bully. I'm going to name you a bad character. So yeah, it's really fun when you personalize it that way. And it definitely brings a lot more humanity to your scripts when you're, adding real life little storylines and real.
Yeah. Exactly. And you kind of touched upon it a little bit earlier, but obviously you're an activist for disability awareness, having MS. How do you think your disability informs you in your writing? And also those around you. Like do you feel like, especially, you're also a woman and person of color in a very male dominated field. Do you feel like you have to fight to be heard, like in a writer's room or just getting your script, made or any of that process?
No, before 2018, before the wheelchair, I had never even considered, and it's not, and I never want people to come out thinking, oh, I should know better or I should do better, or blah. I mean, yeah, maybe we should all do better, but more than anything, it's just, it doesn't pop into your head. It just wasn't something, I didn't grow up with people with disabilities really. And in my personal circle of family and friends, I didn't have no people with disabilities, especially visible disabilities, right? Um, I think there's an apparent. I think the new word we're using is apparent disabilities versus visible and invisible, apparent and non-apparent disabilities. Anyway, that's a little advocacy thrown in there. But I never really thought of it. I never seen it in TV or movies, and it was never. And then when I started using the chair, I was like, wait a minute. I watched, I think it was A Good Wife, where Michael J. Fox played a lawyer, and he's got Parkinson's, in real life, and he's not doing, I mean, physically he's not doing very well. You can see how he's, progressively getting worse, but he plays this lawyer and he's amazing because the character uses his disability to aid him in his cases, right? And he's a jerk and he's a complete a-hole. And like you hate him, but I'm like, but I love it, right? We're watching this character that's a nasty person using his disability, but not crying about it, not being like, oh, my life is so horrible or whatever. It's like the first normal character with a disability I've seen where the disability is not the storyline. And so anyway, so the more I thought about me and my situation, I went back to the script, which is called Sold, where the chief of police is a wheelchair user. And I had a police consultant because at that time I had a producer who was very interested in the film in the show. And so he got me in contact with a consultant. Anyway, he we were like, could a chief of police use a wheelchair? And he's like, absolutely. He's like, we have cops all the time when they get hurt or they get, something happens to them. They may not be out on the field, they could be in. I was like, that's it. That's the chief. She's a wheelchair user. And it just made it so much more interesting, right? It makes it just whenever you have somebody with a disability. I'm watching The Penguin right now. And the Penguin, his little sidekick guy, whose name is, I can't think of it right now, he stutters. And I'm like, but there's never any discussion about his stuttering. I'm like, I love it because it makes the character so much more real. You know what I mean? So much more. So in my activism, it's also about writing character, and that's changed my perception of everything, right? Is now writing characters that have disabilities and normalizing this in TV and film. And I don't know if I just veered away from what your original question was, but yes, there's definitely my activism because I never knew. It wasn't until I was put in the position of using a wheelchair, I never knew what a completely different world it is. And how, maybe I may not have seen myself represented as a Latina or as a woman, but I've never seen you know what I mean? This is more, for some reason, this one hurts more. This one hits me most. So yes, there's definitely a lot.
You would think, these topics would be more prevalent in media, and it would just kind of, as you said, you write characters that, have a disability, but it isn't the main focus of it. We've seen that over and over again.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm just glad that it's being more written about these days. I just watched Anna Kendrick's Woman of the Hour, and one of
I
the
haven't seen that.
really, really good. One of the main characters has a disability, but it's not written in as, oh, it's hindering her or anything. It's just who she is. And,
Mhm.
and it doesn't, it's just it highlights the character so well. Um the film itself is creepy about the about the serial killer that was on a dating show back in the
Yes, 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 yes.
70s. Yes, that
Mhm,
one.
mhm. I
Yes,
just saw the
yes.
commercial. You said Anna Kendrick, and I'm like, I know, I just saw something about that. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that was just another example, I feel like, where uh Anna was talking about, casting these people, and it was just one of the things where, she was like, yeah, she has a disability, and that's who she is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's, there was, I think it was called Bad Education, or an English show that was really good. And I was following for a while, and for some reason I stopped watching it, or I can't. Anyway, and there's a wheelchair user who's one of the characters who's a wheelchair user, and he's mean and nasty. And I'm always like, if I was going to act, I want to be the mean and nasty person. But no, but again, he doesn't care that, it doesn't matter that it's like, Hollywood decided one day or whatever that anybody who has a disability is the same personality for every single person. They're crying, they're sad, and they're upset, and they're horrified, or they're on drugs, or they're homeless, or they're, you know what I mean? Like pathetically sad lives, which isn't true at all. And so, yeah, there was another show, the one with I think Patricia Arquette, about Palm Springs. And anyway, in one of the places that one of the main locations that they frequent, the receptionist is a wheelchair user, and she's always doing social media, and she's just kind of like flighty, and you know what I mean? And I'm like, the fact that she uses a wheelchair has nothing to do with any of it. So anyway, yes, we can keep talking about that, but yeah. Um, but it is changing, and also authenticity in casting. And one thing I talk about is how, I don't remember the numbers, but the amount of movies that have won Academy Awards, or actors that have won Academy Awards for playing disabled characters, only out of that many, I don't have the numbers in front of me, only two were actually played authentically by actors with disabilities. So that's another, is now becoming more and more asked for, or more and more awareness of
Yeah.
actually casting. In fact, I'm in a program right now where we're learning how to be accessibility consultants for sets, so that if they're going to have authentic casting and they're going to do all that, is how to talk to productions and how to work with productions to make their sets accessible for people with disabilities. So this is a long training program, but so that's really cool. This is the first time anything like this is being done. And you've been on set, you know how sets are like so hard to navigate. So
Yeah.
yeah. So there's a lot more awareness and a lot happening.
Wow. Yeah, no, I didn't even realize. Yeah, I didn't even realize that there was such a thing as, the role of being a disability. What did you say? A disability
It's they're called production
production.
production accessibility coordinators is
Yes.
one of the words, and there's other, I can't remember what they're calling our group. But yeah, no, it's new. It's something that's just starting to happen now. In the past couple of years, I think this particular company has started out small, but now they're getting grants to be able to do training and things like that. So,
That's
and I just was
amazing.
at last week, I was at Warner Brothers for October. Oh, happy Halloween, by the way.
Yes, happy
I should
Halloween.
have I should have put on a costume for this. I didn't even think of it. Um, Last week there was October is the month of Employees with Disabilities Awareness Month, and Warner Brothers put on a screening at the studio of their employees who had made disabled employees and movies that shorts that they made. And so it was this, big event with red carpet, and it was like they showed six films that were either made or portrayed people with the characters with disabilities or writers or somebody behind this camera. And it was so cool. And then they all the studios have their diversity programs, and they're really really going after the organizations that work with people with disabilities behind and in front of the camera. So I mean, it's growing. I'm of the mindset that I'm like, okay, I think I'm at the right place at the right time for the first time in my life. Um, but yeah, but it's good to see. It's nice to see, and it's nice to see that it's a big push, and that we are being more and more accepted. The fact that I was a wheelchair user did not bother either of the two writers. I mean, it wasn't a thing. Um, so no, and I haven't. And you asked about the male dominated or the ableism in Hollywood. I have not experienced any kind of male dominated situation. You know what I mean? I have not experienced that I have not been heard or listened to or anything because I'm a woman, or that I have not been hired for jobs because I'm a woman. I've never felt that or experienced that, I don't think. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not male dominated. It absolutely is. I don't feel that I've missed opportunities, or I don't feel that I haven't been given a job because I'm a woman or because I'm disabled. And I really don't, for people who say that, for people who are like, oh, it's just male dominated, or oh, women, or oh, Latinos, guess what? There are people doing it. There are Latinos doing it. There are women doing it. So, no, you know what I mean? Of course, we could have more. We always could have more, but don't let that be the reason why. Don't let that be your excuse. I think that people use that as an excuse because of the rejection, because there's so much rejection, you kind of need to hold on to something. And the one thing you don't want to hold on to is that you're maybe not good at what you do, um, or that you could use more training or more, education. But to use that as an excuse, if you look around, people are doing it. Women are doing it. Latinos are making it. People with disabilities are making it. So,
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like the biggest step you can make is just start doing it.
yeah.
Don't let it get to your head, and obviously, there are some pushbacks, but use that as motivation, I feel like, rather than,
Mhm.
oh, no, I'm not good, or, whatever you just said,
Mhm.
use it, push yourself.
Totally, totally. And and yeah, just don't ever let that, because that's the first thing everybody's going to tell you. I remember people used to say, we'd have speakers and they'd say, oh, do you have any advice? And the advice would be like, don't do it. And I'm like, well, you're doing it. Why can't I do it? And how dare you tell me I can't do it when you are doing it? And
Yeah.
I hate that more than anything. And I hear it over and over and over again. And I'm like, no, just know that it's got to be in your blood. Because if it's not in your blood, you're going to suffer tremendous. Um, but yeah, I think it's definitely get out there and do it, and be the person that says, I'm the one that's going to do it, not the one that, oh, because all these people are keeping me from doing it, and gatekeepers this and gatekeepers that. Yes, there are gatekeepers, but they're not gatekeeping only because you're a person of color or because you're a person with disabilities. They gatekeep everybody. There's like the same thing goes for everybody. It's who you know, where you are, right place at the right time, the right project when they were looking for it. This person, because you met at this fellowship, now can like guide you to something else later. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And kind of going off of and going along with what we were just talking about with pushing the system, how do you get into a writer's room? You've worked on some bigger shows, and movies and whatnot. And how would someone kind of just starting out or budding into the industry, get into the writer's room and start the career.
Yeah, so let's see. Let's talk 2018 on, because that's when I decided to fully, change my focus to writing. So I wrote my pilot script, and I submitted it. So what I did was I needed to learn, but I wasn't going to go back to school. I didn't want to do any of that, go back and get into even more debt and, whatever. How was I going to learn? Well, then I found out that all the studios have these workshops and these fellowships for writers. They have them for directors and for talent actors as well. But they're all DI. They're all, diversity, inclusion. They're all looking. But I think also it's not just the person or the writer, but also the topic of what you're writing is also a big decider. So anyway, so I started applying to these fellowships, and they're all free to apply to. They're just highly, highly, highly competitive. So one of the ones that I applied to, this was in 20, actually I applied to it in 2018 and I didn't get in. And then I applied to it again in 2019, which was the Producers Guild it was called the Producers Guild of America. It's a long title, hold on. Diversity, PGA's diversity work. So, oh my goodness, it was such a confusing name that I can't even. Master Workshop, Diversity Master Workshop. And it was this 8-week program. We met twice a week for 3 hours a week, and we workshopped our scripts. And we were given, we were put in touch with a bunch of different producers and showrunners and writers, and we were meeting these people, and then we had a chance to pitch to particular creators or showrunners or executives. So that was my first fellowship that I got into with that script, which is the script I was talking about earlier. That's based on my short film. And there was a producer there who was an Academy Award winning producer. He won the Academy Award for Million Dollar Baby, if you remember that movie. And
Yes, yes.
even further back, even way back, there was a movie called Primal Fear, and it had Richard Gere and Edward Norton in it. It's a really good movie if you haven't seen it. He won an Academy Award for that movie as well. A very prolific president and head of very big production companies. So he liked my show. And so he started pushing it forward. And he's the one I mentioned, put me in touch with a LAPD consultant. And so we made sure that the procedural aspect of it was right and everything. And we can talk about heartbreaks because there's a million heartbreaks at some point. But so that got me my start. And I can, like I said, I keep saying I'll tell you this story later, but I will go into a million different tangents. So keep you focused. Let's stay focused, Deanna. From there on, I just started applying to different fellowships. And so from 2019 on, every year I've been in some fellowship or another. And so every time I'm in those fellowships, my circle of people I know is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So and so I was like, okay, I need to get in a room. I need to get in a room. I'm thinking here, well, all my film experience, that's going to get me in a room, no problem. And I'm like, oh, wait, TV is a completely different beast, completely different beast. So except for production, when you're in production, when you're on set, it's similar. Obviously, all the roles are the same, but they're moving at a much faster pace, right? Because I think you have like 7 days to shoot an episode or, crazy schedules like that. So with that being said, is I needed to get in a room. How am I going to get in a room? How am I going to get in a room? And there's a program called, and people can look this up. It was hashtag Start with 8 Hollywood. And Start with 8 Hollywood is put on by a group called Women of Color Unite. And so it's a mentorship program, and it's free, and you apply for it. You just and there was no selection process. If you got your application in on time by the deadline or whatever, and they had enough mentors, they would match you with a mentor. So I was like, I'm doing it. I got to do this. I got to do this. I need a mentor. So I applied. I missed the deadline, so I didn't get in. So then I wrote to them. I'm like, and they're like, oh, I said something on Facebook. I don't know what it was. And they're like, don't worry, as soon as we get more mentors, we'll open it up again. And we'll announce it. And so when they announced it, they told us when they were opening the submission process. And it was like 9 a.m. on Monday morning or whatever. I set my alarm I set my alarm for like 10 minutes before that. And I sat at the computer and I just looked at the clock. And as soon as the clock changed, I'm like, okay, turned in my application. So by doing that and being so on it, on top of it, I ended up getting two mentors, which was really cool. One was a writer for television, and one is a producer. One is a writer for television, and one is a producer. And so not only did I get one mentor, but I got two. Eventually, like I think that was in January of 2021. And I had told, for some reason, dates pop into my head. And I told myself that I would have a job in a writer's room by April 6th. So I think around maybe February or March, the mentor who's a producer contacted me and she said, I have a friend who is a TV writer. And would you be interested in having a general with her and just chatting with her? I'm like, of course, absolutely. So we met and she was amazing. And we talked for like an hour and we just, had a great conversation and we were just totally loving each other. It's a love fest, as has been said. Um, anyway, at the end of our conversation, she's like, well, so I have a show coming up that I'm show running and I'm looking for a writer's assistant. And is this something you'd be interested in? I'm like, screaming. I'm like, absolutely. Are you kidding me? Yes, 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 yes. And she's like, this is my first time being a showrunner. So I'm paired with another showrunner. And so let's set up a meeting for the three of us to talk. So we talked. They, again, love fest. We loved each other. So that's how I got my first job in a writer's room. And because it was 2021, people still were doing remote. So we were hybrid. I mean, we were remote the whole season. We wrote, it was 4400 on the CW, which was a reboot of the 4400 that had come out several years before. I think it was on USA or FX. Anyway, this was a remake. And it was rewritten with a huge focus on the premise of the story is that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in some little town, 4,400 people show up from all over history, like time travelers, like and just 4,400 people show up. And so what this person, this writer that I met with, Ariana Jackson, had done is the specific, the ensemble cast of the 4,400, not the 4,400 people, let's say 12 or 13 of them are all people of color and they came from different parts of history. And so we have a doctor from the 20s who's transgender, or you know what I mean? And so it's all these different characters that are very, very diverse, dealing with landing. They were plucked away from their lives and all of a sudden just arrived in this place. So it's very, very diverse. It was really cool. The writer's room was really cool. There was a character with a disability. And, one of the things the showrunners both said is we did not hire you because you have a disability, just so you know. And I was like, no, but I can give you a lot of insight. I had a writer who came to me and said, he was writing an episode and he was going to write about the character who has a apparent disability. And he's like, so blah, blah, blah. So I was able to talk to him about this. So that was my first show. And then we wrapped the room in December of 20. Oh, and I got my job. I actually started on April 6th April 5th. I'd said I was going to get a job by April 6th, and I actually started the room on April 5th. So that was really cool. And we worked until December. We wrapped the room in December, and the network made us wait until about May, I think, before telling us that they canceled the show. Oh. So we were all kind of waiting around to see if is it going to be renewed? And we knew that what we had heard about CW was that they're really good to their freshman shows. Mm-hmm. So that that the likelihood was that we were going to get a second season. So I think that's why nobody was like rushing to find another job. Right. Well, we got canceled. So then it was like, what do I do now? Because, you always hope that there'll be several seasons and maybe you'll, be promoted to writing or something. So anyway, a couple months later, I got a call. Then that was a Good Trouble team. And again, as a writer's assistant. And so again, I came in and it was the fifth season and they weren't even sure if they were going to get a fifth season. And then they got the fifth season. And so that was 20 episodes. So 4,400 was 13 episodes. Good Trouble was 20 episodes. And we finished writing the 20th episode the night before the strike started last year.
Wow.
And we wrote it with a lot of cliffhangers for season, hoping for season 6. And again, the network, Freeform, made us wait until the strike was over in November to tell us that they were canceling the show. So, it's that's part of the heartbreaks of this industry. But so that's how I got my first start in the writer's room. And the second one was because of the union. Once I was on 4400, I became eligible for the union. And the union has a listserv that shows your availability or not. So Good Trouble called me through their job board list that they have, the
That's
union
so
has.
interesting. Wow, what a
Yeah.
story. How what is the turnaround time for these scripts for, 13 episode versus 20 episode and, TV, especially cable, both of these I think are cable, are just like, so quick. Yeah, yeah.
Both of them are network, yeah.
How quick do you have to write?
So the writers have I think it's about a week turnaround. I'd have to go back and look at all the dates of everything. Everything moves so fast. But say for example, the 13 episodes we started in April and wrapped in December. So, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, 8 months to write 13 episodes. And they were concurrently shooting as well.
Mm,
And I think the first episode premiered in let's see. I think the first episode premiered around October. So we had already started writing in April. And then after a couple of episodes is when they started shooting. But, streamers have changed everything now because, like, I just had a job interview, which I didn't get. But I had a job interview for a job for Netflix, and they're gonna write until about February, but it's only eight episodes because that's what the streamers are doing too. They're doing less episodes. So, and then they weren't going to start shooting. So because of this binge thing, and they're releasing full seasons. So now they don't shoot concurrently. It's the writers go and they write the entire season and then they start shooting, which is, another horrible thing for writers because it used to be that as a writer you would go on set for your episode when your episode was being
right.
shot. And now they're not doing that. So that was a big
Wow.
part of the strike last year. Yeah. So
Wow.
um
Yeah.
yeah, and then for Good Trouble, we started in August of 2022 and finished, like I said, the night before the strike, which was in May of last year. So a little bit less than a year to write the 20 episodes.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
It's such a different world. I've dabbled in screenwriting, but nothing like, other people who are, they're in it. And it's just so interesting to hear. Yeah, it didn't even dawn on me that screenwriters don't really get to be on set anymore, especially with the streamers, being,
With the streamers.
you write everything first and then, you don't really get to make those edits as
Mhm.
much, right on the spot for next episode or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah. And I got to shadow one of the writers on Good Trouble. And so I spent a day on set. And I didn't realize how important it is to have a writer on set until I realized or I learned that every episode is directed by somebody else. So while film is really a director's vehicle, TV is a writer's vehicle, except for in streaming has kind of changed that. So the importance of having a writer on set is because directors who come on, they don't necessarily know what's going to happen later or what's going to happen before. So any dialogue change could affect. And in the writer's room, we've already while they're filming episode one, we're already probably writing episode four. So episode or two, whatever episode two, the director doesn't know what's going to happen in episode five. So if the director says, well, let's change this to blah, 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 and that piece of dialogue will change what happens in episode four, the writer has to be there to say, no, this is the reason why we can't do that. Or the writer can contact the showrunner and be like, hey, they want to do this or that. So it's
right.
really important for the writer because the writer is the only person on that set that knows what the writer's room is working towards later. So that is super important, but that's also used to be a way you work the ladder, a way to climb the ladder was as a writer being on set, you're learning also what showrunners do and how productions run. Right now, there's all these writers who've started out writing in streamers that are on set, they don't know. And so the ladder to climb to be a showrunner doesn't exist anymore
Right.
because if they don't have any set experience, how can they be showrunners? So it's
Yeah,
all
no, that
linked.
yeah, for sure. No, that's something I've definitely even felt in the camera department. There's no camera PA job anymore.
Oh.
Which is obviously where you first start out to, climb to AC and then DP and and now a lot of people are like, how do I even, without knowing someone already that would get me on a set, how do I start
Mhm.
out if there's no entry level
Yeah.
job. Yeah. It's really interesting how the strike and over the years things have definitely changed for good or for better. But
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and for TV, it's just, and I always joke because so both 4400 and Good Trouble were network TV, right? One was CW and the other one was Freeform. Both of which are, I think Freeform has just gotten rid of all their scripted and are going towards unscripted or might be in the process of getting sold. CW was sold, and that's why both of those shows were canceled. With that said, the streamers have really changed the landscape, and we don't know what's happening because there's still going to be network TV. You know what I mean? We still
right.
have all the networks and we still have cable. It's not all just streamers. So I joke and I'm like, I just want to only work in network TV because they still have, 13, 20 episodes. There's still, a lot of the showrunners are running the rooms the way that they were always historically it's been done, or, at least in the last few decades. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
And you mentioned you're now in the union. Do you have management or an agent as well? How would you navigate that getting into the union, and do you think someone needs like a management company to help guide them in getting jobs for screenwriting? Like how does that work?
So I've not had a manager until just recently. I think last month I signed with a manager, but I had not had a manager before that. So all the work I've done has been through my own networking or getting around. And I'm not yes, I am a networker. I'm not good about going places and just meeting people. If it's a group of people I know, I'll go and. Um, but the fellowships is one of the ways to do it. Fellowships are huge because you stay in contact with your peers, your cohort, but you're also meeting all these other speakers. And now you can write them down, go, okay, met this person on this date, blah, blah, blah. Now I can send them an email and say, hey, I was really interested in what you had to say. I attended, da, 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 da. And that's how you open those doors. Query letters, forget about them. No, for managers anyway, forget it. Um, so your question was management union. Oh, the union is IATSE, which is the International Alliance of Television and something association international. Oh, stage, I think. Television and stage. Anyway, if you guys heard about strikes, that the possibility that there could have been strikes this year, the IATSE was one of the unions that was in negotiations, as were the Teamsters, as were the one other one, I think Crafts or something like that. IATSE is the umbrella for a bunch of different local chapters. So, for example, my boyfriend is an editor and he's in the IATSE, but the editors and also the Editors Guild. IATSE 871 covers writers' assistants, script coordinators, script supervisors, and several other crew positions, if you will. And so, because I worked in 4400 and you get it's by hours. So, however many hours you work on a union show, then you become eligible and you have to pay your dues. But then that comes with healthcare benefits, that comes with all of that. So, that's the only way to get in. You have to be working in that position. So, you have to hopefully get hired by somebody who knows, you don't have to be in the union to get hired. You just have to get hired by somebody and then, get your hours. Um, so there's that. And then as far as managers, and then Writers Guild is, when you start writing, when you're like, if I was in a writer's room and I was given an episode to write, then I would be eligible for the Writers Guild. Screen Actors Guild, I'm eligible for Screen Actors Guild. I just haven't paid the money for it. So there's, different ways, but all of them require you to have done the work in that particular discipline, if you will, to be able to get in the union. So no, you can do a lot of work without getting in the union first, but setting yourself up for that. And then as far as management, I learned very quickly that query letters, nobody looks at query letters. Once film and TV became a method that became more accessible to people, that, more people started wanting to work in these industries. It's like there's so many people wanting to work in this industry. And so managers and agents are getting tons of query letters of people they know nothing about. So to make a long story short is no, I think the manager I got was somebody that used to run, there's an organization called Roadmap Writers. I don't know if you're familiar, well, if anybody's familiar with them on Facebook, Roadmap Writers, or you can look up their website. And he was like their diversity. He's a writer and has published some books, and he was their diversity person. And I had talked to him a few times, and we stayed in touch on social media. And then he decided to open a management company. And I was like, hey, do you need a disabled Latina woman of a certain age person? And he's like, I'm only managing people over 40. There, I just aged myself. And he said, and yes, let's talk. And so I ended up signing with him. And as luck would have it, and that's how it works. You establish relationships, and at some point or another, somebody's going to say, it's all word of mouth. It really is. I have not gotten a job in this industry from sending in an application. All the jobs I've ever gotten are through people I know. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I have to say the same thing when people are like, "Oh, how do I should I apply to this or should I email that?" You can, but for me personally, again, as you said, it's a networking industry. You got to know people who then will give you something you want.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
And you don't
yeah.
have to, and people get scared. There's a lot of, introverts that are people who are more like, get panicked or a little panicky about having to go to an event or having to go network. And I say there's other ways to network. There are and free. And people, when I speak at panels and stuff, there's always the joke because the people who invite me to speak at panels always hear me say the same thing, which is apply to anything and everything that's free. Don't spend the money because every studio has free programs to apply to. Every studio does. Every organization has some kind of program or another. For like I said, for directors, for you just go to all the studio websites and look at their careers or internship programs. But apply to everything because that's a good way to network too. When you get accepted into things, then that's a way. So you don't have to go to and then the other thing too is webinars. There's webinars online. There's all kinds of things that are always free. Look them all up, read them, write the names of the people who are doing them. That way now you have a way to contact them. And it's something they're not always going to give you their contact and they're not always going to be the ones who answer their emails, but at least you have something. You can say, hey, I saw this webinar that you did and something you said struck me and I wanted to reach out. And that's how you start networking.
Yeah,
So,
that's great advice. Yeah,
mhm.
because I know there are a lot of people that are they're afraid to put themselves out there and they're afraid to, they don't necessarily want to, go out and, meet people this X, Y, and Z thing. But there's other things like events that you can just show up to and then kind of wiggle your way and say hi to maybe one person and you don't know, that one person could give you your next big gig. So,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And and I mean, to be honest, I don't go to those because I just don't feel I feel weird. I don't feel comfortable just walking up to somebody and saying hi. There are people who do, and that's awesome for them. So that's why my work around that was the fellowships and all of that was that's how I will get to know people because or have a friend. I have another friend who she's a director and she's a co-chair of the Directors with Disabilities at the DGA. And she has MS as well. And so she's my date. So we go to all of these like events and stuff because we have each other. So we're like each other, we're like if you're just sitting around, at least you have somebody to talk to. But so yeah.
Right. What's the process for like your a screenplay getting picked up and dealing with distribution companies? How do you get it out there in the world for people to see?
So, when you're talking about television, like I mean, that you do have to have a manager, you do have to have an agent, but also, again, the fellowships. That's how I had this Academy Award winning. Oh, I didn't finish the story about the heartbreak. But that's how that's if you don't have an agent. Hopefully, my manager, for example, is going to start pushing my scripts out there, and hopefully with some the show that I'm working on right now. If that gains some momentum, they might be interested in reading my pilot that's connected to that, so on and so forth. But so it's and distribution. I mean, no, really, you have to have a production company that knows showrunners, that's connected to networks and stuff. It's easier probably to get a film out there than it is a TV show. But with a film, you're talking about, and I worked in distribution, independent film distribution. And so you're talking about it's a whole different world. And right now, independent film's not doing so great. So right now, the industry's a mess. But um, but I think it's easier to get a film out there than it is, and to get it made at least to be, theatrical film would probably be just as hard to do as getting a TV series. Yeah.
Right,
Hopefully that
right.
answers your question.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's such a complicated world, when you write something, you're like, "Oh, I want this to get," where the end goal, where you want to be, but like getting there, it's like so daunting, I feel like to a lot of
Mhm.
beginners.
It
Um,
is.
yeah, yeah.
It is, and that's why this is somebody said, what did I just hear the other day? And I loved it. And it was, if you're still here, if you're still doing it, that means you're making it. You're getting there. And only the people who stick with it are gonna make it. And making it is your own definition of what making it is, you know. Um, but no, it takes a long time. I mean, it's like winning the lottery. Some people make it really fast, and then you hear about this overnight sensation that actually took 10 years to make or 20 years to make. But that's the thing is we only hear about those. We don't hear about the millions of people who've struggled who year after year after year. Um, but it's longevity, the longer you're with it, you're not going to make it. I don't care how brilliant your project is, unless it gets some kind of attention, unless it wins some kind of big award. And it's not like little screenwriting competitions, it's the big ones. Um, you're going to have a really hard time making it overnight. You're not going to make it overnight, is the point. So, yeah, it's definitely not easy. Not easy.
Yeah. Are there some screenwriters that you admire and would hope to work with, or a writing style that you haven't done that you want to do, or something like that?
It's really hard. People used to ask me this about directors, and I was like, I just like so many different things and so many different styles. It's hard to pinpoint. I mean, like, I would love to work with Shonda Rhimes, for example. Why I think that her female characters are fantastic. I think her shows are fantastic. I really like her shows. But I also love like your oh my God, what's his name? No, I'm totally forgetting. The procedurals, the what's his name that does all the Law and Orders? Not, oh gosh. See, now I'm blanking. It's always when I get put on spot. I should have a little list. Um, what's his name? Yeah, so like the procedural writers, the ones who have like who've gone season after season after season, who have like a lot of or spin-offs from those shows. I like that. I like, I don't have, yeah, other than that, like I watch shows, like I love The Penguin. Could I tell you who the creator of it is? Not really, I shouldn't be saying this. Um, I love The Bear, for example. I love, what am I watching now that's really good? Oh, Disclaimer.
Mm.
Have you heard of Disclaimer? It's on
No, I
Apple TV.
haven't.
That's really interesting.
It's good.
Anyway, so yeah, but I'm more, like I said, I lean towards mysteries and thrillers and that, or family dramas. I'm not as much into comedy or sitcom work.
Gotcha, gotcha.
So I don't follow as much, yeah.
How for these shows that keep going on and there's how do you deal with like fans? Like is that a factor when you're in the writing room? Like you don't want to disappoint, the fans for X, Y, and Z for, if you have to write out a character, or if there's a big plot twist and you're like, oh, hopefully they don't hate this. What's the process like that in a writer's room, for something as
It's
pivotal like that?
it's funny because, in a writer's room, like I used to always be like, so what happens in a writer's room? Like it's such a mysterious, like what's going on? And I always used to think that, like, what happens in a writer's room? And it's actually like you're basically there all day telling stories. And everybody's telling stories about things that happened to them or whatever. That's why so many writers is so great because you have a plethora of personal stories. But there are times when you're like, oh, they're gonna hate us for doing this, or oh, or like, which couples are the ones that people like the most. And so there's little conversations like that. But then what was really crazy for me is going and reading the comments from fans because I always want to be like, no, 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 you didn't get it right. No, I meant this. No, no, what we meant was that. No, no, hold on, this is what's gonna happen. And you can't do any of that. So you just sit there and you look at everything and you're like, no, that's okay. Well, so there's not, I mean, I don't know that I don't know that I remember in the last two. I know that in 4400, I think for the season finale episode, we brought in one of the favorite characters from the original 4400, and so people were really excited about that. I don't remember in Good Trouble ever like saying that we were going to do something specifically because I'm sure maybe and Good Trouble is a spin-off of a show called The Fosters. Before then, The Fosters, I think, had 5 or 6 seasons as well. So they would always bring back the moms from The Fosters. The Fosters is basically these two women who are married who foster kids. And then the Good Trouble is a spin-off. Two of those the daughters are like the Fosters starts out as their kids, and then Good Trouble is two of those daughters who are now after college and they moved to LA to live. They're in their 20s and it's the first time. So it's like a Melrose Place from back in the day where they all live in one building downtown LA, and it's an ensemble cast. Anyway, so we would bring back the moms, and people loved seeing the moms again. Or we would bring in the brother or the sister or the other brothers of the group, of the family. And so, stuff like that is really fun to do, and fans love it. But we don't really like, it's not just sit there and say, oh, this fan hated this, let's go change this, or, you know. So yeah, so it's natural, and you just kind of have to like remove yourself and not feel bad because somebody hated something you did, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely an industry where yeah, you kind of have to brush things off pretty quick or not care what other people think.
Yeah.
You have a story and you know what it's gonna be, and if people don't like
And
it, people
people
don't like
don't
it.
exactly, and people don't know where you're going with it either. So
Exactly,
you might
especially in
like it this,
TV.
but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's like that's why like it's so hard for me to not respond and be like, just wait, you'll see, you'll like it. Like right now, because we had to change the ending because we knew we were canceled. And so the ending of the that last episode, there had to be things that were changed. And I want to tell people what we had originally written, what
Oh,
it was going to be had we
yeah.
continued on. But then I don't, I tell my friends or whoever watch the show. But anyway, yeah,
Right, right. Awesome. So we're gonna kind of like switch it up a little bit, and we're
sure.
gonna do the film Would You Rather.
Yes, okay.
It's just one question pertaining to, in this case, screenwriting. And my question for you would be, would you rather write a fresh script, like, you know, original, or would you rather adapt a screenplay?
Ooh, was there a both? Can I choose both? Would you rather? Oh, that's a good question. That's a hard one. I like adapting. I've adapted before. Now, are you saying adapt it for as a TV series or as a movie?
Anything, just adapting, the writing or writing a fresh script.
Yeah, that's a really hard one. I really like both. I mean, the original one because it's all coming from your mind and your brain and your creative story. The adapting is really cool because you already have all this stuff there. You're just picking, out of it. And I've adapted novels before, and I really like doing that. Very hard question. Don't make me answer it.
I know they're
Um,
two very different things too.
right now, the way
Yeah.
that the industry is so based on IP that I think I would rather do something based on IP because I think it would have more chances of maybe getting picked up or getting looked at. However, your mindset and the way you are has to change with the industry as the industry changes. You look for those paths. So I would really, really, really like to adapt based on something that's done really well, IP wise.
Gotcha. Awesome answer. And then I'm
Thank
just
you.
gonna roll kind of right into the last question that I ask everyone is, if you could tell your younger self, what advice would you give them starting out in this film industry, in this crazy entertainment world?
Um, that it's okay, to not make it, to not be one of the top 30 under 30 people that Hollywood Reporter always puts out, or that it's okay to not be, that it's okay to be older, that forget about the being a person of color, person with disability, or ageism, forget all of that. People make it, you can make it. And I think that that would take a lot of the stress that I've felt all these years of trying to make it. What's making it? And just defining what does making it mean. To me, making it means now, making it means that I've stuck around this long, that I have been able to stick around this long. So my advice to my younger self is be patient, know that it's not going to happen right away, and that you might go in a million different ways until you find the one specific thing that is exactly what you wanted to do, or you know exactly what it is that you want to do and keep doing it and keep working towards that. But be patient and know that if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
That's great
And
advice.
keep loving it. Keep finding the ways to love it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Love what you do. I feel like when you
exactly.
stop loving it, it becomes work, and but if you love it, it's never going to be work.
No, it's not. And you know what? And it's not going to be easy. And it's going to be really difficult. And you're going to question a lot of things. So you just got to keep. And if you don't, and if you don't want to do it, then it's okay too. That doesn't mean failure. That means you just realized that it wasn't for you. And that's okay, you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on
Oh,
the
you're
podcast
welcome.
today. This has just
Thank
been
you.
such a fruitful conversation, and just yeah, I say it every time, but I just love meeting the people that I get to bring on here and just learning about their journey, and really broadens and makes the film industry seem and feel more accessible.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And yeah, definitely. And you're welcome to, if anybody wants my email address or whatever, you're welcome to share that.
Yeah,
And
how can people find you on social media or anything else you'd like to say? Yeah.
You can find me, Deanna. Well, go to my website because my website has all my contact information, and I'm developing new things as we go. So, my website is my name, Diana, like Diana, Romero.net. So, DianaRomero.net, and that will give you all my information and how to contact me, my manager, and my new show that's coming up, and all that fun stuff.
Yes, and you wanted to add there was it the new show that was coming up that you wanted to
Yeah,
add?
so I'm
Yeah,
working
yeah, yeah.
I'm working right now on a show called Me, Myself, and Other, and it has to do with how my being othered all my life prepared me to be a wheelchair user and to enter that world. And so it's a fun show. It's humorous. I just did a reading of it. I'll be doing an LA reading in December, and then I will be taking it to stage. So there's information on my website about that and the reviews that just came in from my last reading. And then there's on my website, there's also the link that goes directly to the show website. That doesn't have that much stuff in it yet, but it will. But it will. Thank you
Awesome.
so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so
It's been
much.
fun. You're welcome. Good luck with everything. Good luck, everyone.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to learn more about my experience as an up and coming filmmaker or catch up on more episodes, follow me on Instagram at MELYDE12. This podcast is also available on Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Please like, subscribe, and spread the word. Thank you guys again, and that's a wrap.